collaboration, then it would be helpful more, it would be more helpful than it would create more problems, I guess.
Okay, excellent. All right, my last question for the panelists, and we'll open it up. I know it's, we're getting to the witching hour here, but Dr. Maher, this is for you. So I was really happy to hear further about AMPAP, because I think many times in our academic meccas, we work in silos. If it doesn't have our logo on it, then maybe we are less interested. So kudos to you to join, and I think it's something that we're going to look into at Rutgers, and I encourage, obviously, because the more institutions that are part of it, you are doing things in a collaborative nature. What do you say to people that charity starts at home, and the philosophy that we should think globally, but act locally? People who say, well, listen, you're going to fancy places, you're costing, you know, obviously remote area you don't need to. Fancy places. It's exotic, right? But we have folks in rural America who struggle with the same issues, and it's not as sexy. If I'm in Odessa, Texas, or I'm in the middle of Montana or Wyoming, the same issues, access to care issues, lack of surgical capability, etc., as people in Ghana or in rural India. How do you push back against that concept? So, well, that's not, you want the fame and the glory and all that, but you're not taking care of your own house. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, my first thought is actually, I think I may have sort of, I don't know if I commented on this or not, but the concept of globalization, I mean, honestly, this is such an interesting topic to me. You know, the sort of tailwinds for globalization were so staunch for so long. Like, you know, I mean, up until 2019, 2020, it was all tailwind, right? Everybody was thinking about sort of the world as a whole. And I will say also that, you know, COVID underscores the fact that in a way, you know, things, I don't know that, you know, there's headwind now, but I don't know that we're going to be going back to sort of a world in which you can be siloed country to country and state to state. I just don't think, even with, you know, all of the fear that kind of came with COVID, I just don't think we're going back that direction. So I think that while I do agree 100%, you know, I mean, I work in North Philadelphia. What I say to people is like, look, I literally every day go to work and I act locally. Every day. That's what I do, right? So, but I have chosen to expand my capacity for impact to places beyond the place that I can see. And it doesn't mean that I have to go there. Quite frankly, I don't spend a lot of time in Ghana, right? I spend time at Temple, sort of leveraging the skills and the knowledge and the connections I have to impact our partners in the way they want to be impacted, but I don't spend a lot of time there. You know, so I think that it is, I do think it's really important to frame this as that it's important for us to build a skill set and an interest and a movement toward creating equity in access to healthcare, 100%. And that goes for Odessa, Texas, and that goes for Ghana. But sort of I think like it's a little short-sighted, quite frankly.
All right, well, I promised 3 questions. Please, if you could, you know, raise your hand and introduce yourself and ask questions.
How are you? Dominic Katz, I'm in Miami, Kansas too. Thank you guys very much. Awesome conversation. One short comment, just tagging on to that answer, because I've actually had a similar discussions with friends of mine. And the conclusion I've come to in thinking about this idea of, well, why aren't we helping at home? Is that it's unfair to try to add a value on charity, right? I mean, it shouldn't be more nice or more charitable to help somebody in one area opposed to another. But I think, like you said, that really the priority should be what can you offer based on your experiences, based on your personal culture, very importantly based on your interests, right? If you have a specific interest in going to a certain part of the world or of the country, that should drive you. I mean, when we do things based on obligation or guilt, we're much less likely to be successful than if it's because of what we're interested in. Even if you loved your Spanish class in high school and have always been drawn towards Latin American culture and that's where you want to go, even if it's virtually, I think that's a bigger reason to do it than because you want to feel good about what you do.
I think everybody in this room would agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you that there's people outside this room who will raise the question that as an institution, there may be more to do locally. So, you know, that's the backdrop.
No, and there is a ton to do locally, but that's my answer to that. My actual question for Dr. Maher also, you clearly had a lot of institutional support in developing this, but I'm sure you did run into.
Plus a credit card.
Plus, and
I didn't
$200
use
in
that
cash.
Yeah,
And a
it's
fanny
$200.
pack. How can you not succeed? But I'm sure you ran into difficulties along the way. In a nutshell, can you highlight one or two of them?
I just want to say I'm still running into difficult, you know, this is like the you know, sunshine and roses version of what's really happening, but I think the biggest challenge is first so I am very lucky, right? I mentioned that Dean Goldberg was my residency program director. She recruited me as a resident to Temple and then recruited me back as faculty. So when she recruited me back as faculty, the terms of my employment actually were really, you know, to be honest with you, it was 3 months of protected time for global surgery. Now, I ended up having a child within the first 3 months. That's damn good, she wanted to do that.
Yeah.
But, you know, I ended up not using that to go out of country because I ended up having a child, right? So you know, so I've had tons of support. She is now the dean, and we have support still. That makes it a lot easier. I will say that the reason that I've continued to have support is because you need to have a plan and a vision, right, that makes sense for your place. We're a program that recruits people who want to serve the underserved. And we recruit people who probably differentially state that they have interest in global surgery. Well, if you want to recruit people who want that experience, you have to actually be able to provide them with something that is of value for them long-term in their career, regardless of whether they choose to integrate global surgery or not. So,
excellent answer about institutional culture.
yeah.
Okay, Dr. Valley. Other people have their hand up, but please go ahead since you're
I'm
up.
going to make this very quick. I thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. I actually wanted to just add a comment to, just adding a comment.
We can hear you.
You can.
Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly add a comment regarding the question that you asked, because I work with the side of that question a lot these days. All of us in this room are tied by the humanitarian cause that is global surgery. We all have taken an oath. For us, that's what's at the core of all of this. That said, within the administration of our departments, within the policy world, we come in contact with a lot of individuals who are motivated with different priorities than us. That doesn't mean they don't have humanitarian streak. It means that they have to set other priorities first, but they don't share our priorities. And that conversation, I always try to take it back to, because the question is, what is it in it for us, right? That's what they're asking. So I like to take it back to this. We always present about what we do in other countries, how it benefits them. We often don't talk about how it benefits us. It actually does benefit us. Every one of us who has done any initiative in global surgery has learned and earned skills that we wouldn't have otherwise. And they're not taught in any of our institutions otherwise. We encounter colleagues across the globe who have a lot of skill sets that we don't have. We are talking about the pandemic over and over. The pandemic showed that low middle income countries, the physicians and surgeons who were used to dealing with low resources, they weren't on their knees like we were for not having masks. So these are ways that we can bring it back home. And in the state of Texas, for my program, I'm the first fellow in my program. For the program to continue, for our funding to continue, I had to show local impact. And so the model I created for our trauma evaluation is something that I'm planning to expand globally and showing them that this is applicable to rural Texas as much as it is somewhere else, because it's a geomap and we can use it in.
I'm happy you said that, the bidirectionality of lessons, not just we can't go there and say, well, we're here to teach you. I made that mistake. When I was a young assistant professor of shock trauma, I went to India my first talk, and I talked about the helicopter scheme that Dr. Cowley had come up with 9 helicopters, and I thought I did a great job, and the guy at the end of the room stood up and raised his hand and said, thank you very much for your beautiful talk and your small state with 9 helicopters. We don't have a scooter to let it go to the patient's house and pick him up. So it was a harsh reality. There are lessons that we can learn. So I'm very thankful for your comment. Please.
Hi, Dr. Kaplan. Thank you so much for a great presentation. You spoke about the need for operational...
Oh, please introduce yourself first.
Oh, sorry, I'm Catherine Campos, current World Health Organization Civil Military Emergency Teams Council member. And I really enjoyed your presentation talking about operational securitization in your project. I'm wondering, that's something that is being talked about right now in the civil military humanitarian emergency response community. And so I'm wondering, how do you anticipate that model being disseminated to civil military emergency health operations as well as humanitarian surgical response programming in the humanitarian context?
That is a multi-layered and nuanced question. But as technology advances so that you can, in essence, spoof from where a signal originates, that is how that will be distributed. Because at the moment, if you have a cell phone, don't you? I can find you, right? We can triangulate off of all the cell towers. But what if we couldn't? What if it didn't rely on the cell towers for triangulation? What if instead it was satellite-based and spread across a federated system and network? All of a sudden, now your phone is appearing in 1,000 places. That's how that's going to be operationalized, so that you can't track me by this. Only my wife can track me by this and figure out whether or not I really went to Wegmans to pick up dinner.
Excellent point. So some other hands that were up here. No, any other questions? Well, I want to, okay, please. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Back a few years ago, we had guidelines and protocols, and from that we had medical legal implications. Now we're having AI, and we're at the nuance. How do we put a cap or a limit on the medical legal implications based on the fact that we're in a highly litigious environment, although we're trying to do good internationally, we're US-based institutions.
Great question. Dr. Kewalramani, that goes to you. The others can answer as well, but your thoughts.
That is a great question. I think that like any solution that you build with AI, it could be built in your institution, but the algorithm is code, right? There's only X amount of limitations you can run around software and algorithms. So managing that, it should be one of our priorities, but also maybe utilizing the approach of open source could reduce the legal limitations while also allowing us the opportunity to help everyone.
What they've done in the Netherlands, because they have operationalized AI for rate control of vasoactive infusions, among other things. And they simply said, this is your decision tool. Every AI-based decision gets sent to the responsible clinician. You can agree or disagree. If you agree, then it's as if you did it. So therefore, they've limited some of their liability by making sure that you know exactly what that algorithm is doing, and you have override control. But you can imagine, and I suspect you have imagined, what happens when you don't know? And you've bought into the algorithm. The institution said, we're doing it this way. We're going to control your ventilator so you have low tidal volume compliant ventilation. Maybe that's not what you wanted to do. And maybe there's an outcome that's untoward because your patient really needed to have pulmonary recruitment. But, you know, the institution said this.
And
So,
those lawsuits are coming.
oh, yes.
They're coming. Excellent. Please.
Hi, thank you so, ooh, this is very loud. My name is Rashi Jinjinwal. I'm a PGY4 general surgery resident at Beth Israel in Boston. I'm actually applying to trauma in this upcoming cycle. And
That's a good choice. You made a great choice.
thank you so much, I think so too. And I'm also aspiring towards a career in academic global surgery. For Dr. Maher, just a quick question. What do you plan for your trainees to do as career paths? How do you see them implementing this like very appropriate, bidirectional, sustainable type of career in their like ongoing practice, and how do you teach them how to convince their future employers that having academic time that is for global surgery initiatives, which may not necessarily result in the H-index publication volume that other types of academic careers might develop, how do you counsel them on how to convince people that that's actually worthwhile?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will say that nearly 100% of all medical students say they're interested in global health. The number drops off by about 50% once they're in residency. and the number of people who actually integrate global surgery into a surgical career is very small. So what do I say to them? I say to them that we offer a program. We have a global surgery concentration. They can get, along with an MPH, like a concentration in global health, if it's something that's of interest to them. So specifically, I tell our trainees, if you're interested, put your money where your mouth is, do the training, get the education, make the connections now. But just recognize that the reality is that for many people, the appetite for this being integrated really does diminish rapidly. So I actually don't stress out about it too much. It would be nice if all of our trainees wanted to be trauma surgeons with some global surgery focus, that'd be ideal.
Yeah.
But the reality is that most of them will not. So
Selfish question, I'm just
yeah,
trying to figure it out
totally.
for
Yeah, you
myself.
can email me, I'll give you some specifics.
Okay,
But
great.
honestly, I don't stress too much about our residents because, it's tough. I mean, there's a lot of, it's rapid attrition when it comes to stated interest with this.
It's a good question. Please, introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Olajima Kemega from a Jersey resident at UMass, our current global surgery fellow. I appreciate all of your talks on your various topics that you talked about, but looking at global surgery and where it's going, it's becoming more and more integrated in various ways in different programs. I appreciate things like MPATH or ACS Hope, which is trying to coordinate efforts amongst different institutions at host sites. However, there's still a lot of silo organizations doing things sometimes at the same time at these host institutions, and host institutions aren't saying no because of course there's also that power dynamic and they also do want the help, but sometimes we are taking over their ORs, they can't do cases on their own, and again, they're not saying no with that power dynamic there. How do you see things moving on in the future in the sense of coordinated efforts amongst the various surgical groups and programs so that we're working together and not necessarily recreating things or taking over their time, but working together with a concerted, goal down the line?
It's an excellent question. It's one I alluded to earlier, so what do you all
Yeah,
think?
No, go ahead. She's a beautiful expert.
My hope is and it is a huge problem. I mean, you are absolutely right. And, there's differential preference for partner sites, right? Like people are very engaged in Ghana. It's an English-speaking country that is safe, right? It's like no surprise that when you compare that to some other environments that there is differential high-income investment there. So it's really, I don't have a good solution. I mean, I do certainly hope that the move toward disinvesting ourselves of interest in sort of being the ones who are doing it, but actually just kind of being part of the solution. I mean, we're trying to, our program, we're putting drops in a bucket. We tried to make the bucket a lot smaller because we wanted to actually be able to fill it, right? So I think that, but I don't know if you're gonna get there because surgeons, are well known for, and probably deservedly so, for liking to take responsibility for things. So I don't have a good solution for that.
Yeah, and I would just add responsibility and credit. And again, it has to be in the political or the environment that you're in. Take a look at what's happening at our academic institutions across this country. I live across the river from Columbia University. Just take a look at what's happening. And you're talking about issues where the institution itself may have a voice and to say where you're going to get involved and where you're not. I don't need an answer for that, but just think about that for a second. And so there's an institutional backdrop, there's an individual surgeon backdrop. It's a complicated issue, but it's going to take people like yourself and those of you who are interested in global surgery coming behind us to help address those issues. That's a great question.
So I think the last time you and I met, you were still at Perelman.
Oh wow, it's been that long, that's right.
It's been that long. Nalaya Fonte, I did trauma and critical care for 25 years, and I've kind of transitioned practice and doing locum surgery. My question is, when I was training back in the year of the flood, when the dinosaurs still roamed the earth, there was very little opportunity as a surgical resident to go anywhere. So, that was back in early 90s. As training developed, practice, et cetera, the interest was there, but as you said, sometimes, you don't have the support from the institution if you wanted to go somewhere else on your vacation. Little kids came along and it got harder. I'm at this end of my career, not ready to, you know, go and rock myself on the front porch in Florida. Is there a place, is there an organization, is there a way to harness the talent and the skills of the more senior surgeon that isn't necessarily retired or maybe kind of semi-retired and now has more time available and resources to be able to provide the finances? Because like I found it, we were hit by Ian. I live in Fort Myers. We were hit by Ian last year. And we actually brought some of the retired surgeons in our community and said, hey, you know what, all hands on deck. I don't care that you retired last year, we need help, we're overwhelmed, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, when your generator blows and the roof flew off of your hospital and you're evacuated and a patient needs a central line, we didn't have the ultrasound to guide us, right? And it was the old folks that still remember the anatomy and know how to put a central line in without the ultrasound. So using that skill, using that talent that I think is still very viable, is there an organizational way of capturing these individuals that probably have an interest and again availability and the finances to provide global assistance outside of trying to reinvent the wheel yourself in an environment that isn't supportive of that in, you know, in its microcosm?
Outstanding question.
You have several opportunities, provided you are senior but not decrepit.
Right. Hopefully not yet.
Right, that's, I'll get there in about a month. Military Reserve, Public Health Service, sign up with an NGO, link your community of senior surgeons with whatever the local giant is in your area in terms of an academic center that has a global health program to say, we can serve. There are spaces in all of those for someone just like you, and the need to be the Marine recruit that is physically fit, that will pump a rucksack for 50 clicks today, that's not what they need from you. You don't have to do that. If you've had your heart transplanted, not going to be a good candidate, but if you're in reasonable shape, there are pathways. You could help with the Indian Health Service. They are in dire need of people who do more than just primary care. So there's lots of ways that you can help it in that way. The College of Surgeons has pathways for people. If you take critical care, there are lots of critical care organizations that have those same kinds of pathways. And they have programs where they may not send you to go do something, but they'll link you with people who need guidance. And that experience is invaluable.
And I would offer that this society could also play a role in that. Because, you know, take a look around. We've got a full generation of folks in the room who have a skill set. And so it's a great question to have that engagement and involvement. How many people are linked with NGOs, by the way? Well, I will tell you, my own work and involvement with an NGO called Save Life Foundation, we just won the Skoll World Forum Award. We're a Skoll Foundation winner. I know, Erica, I was telling you about that yesterday. Unbelievable experience for the Good Samaritan Law and the trauma reductions that we're doing in India. So I got to go to Oxford to receive that award. And the reason I mention that is not to highlight me or the society, but that the engagement allows for involvement in a space that's just more than just your individual one-on-one interaction with you and the patient. That's why I mentioned it. Any last minute questions at all? Well then, on behalf of President Ian, who has given me and obviously the planning committee, I want to thank you for the privilege of being your moderator for this session. I want to thank each of my panelists. I'll start with Dr. Kaplan, Dr. Kewalramani, and Dr. Maher for an outstanding session that generated a lot of interest and buzz. Thank you all so very much. That concludes our session.
One quick announcement. We were going to have a networking session here. We sort of went over the time, but if people are interested, please hang out. There are 3 areas of training, so permissions, and oral surgery. So if people still have energy left, you can hang out and thank you, everyone.
Yeah.